Hello, lovers. Welcome to Heart, the Living Spiritfully podcast. I am your host, Paul Galoro, and in this podcast, I have heart-centered conversations with people I love and admire. Today's guest, I actually never met today's guest until this moment that you're about to see. Krystle Ash is a woman that I met through email when I discovered her company, Goddess Wands. I tell you a little bit about that in our conversation today. This conversation with Krystle is just, I have no words to describe it. You just need to experience it yourself. We go pretty deep. Krystle shares how she has used her spiritual practice and a lot of spiritual tools in helping her heal from severe mental illness. This is my Heart to Heart with Krystle Ash. Please enjoy. So today I have the absolute honor and pleasure to have a conversation with a woman that this is actually the first time we're like meeting face to face, heart to heart. This is the beautiful Krystle Ash. Krystle, welcome to Heart to Heart.
Oh, thank you for having me, Paul.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you're here, and just to fill in everyone that's listening, how I'm having a conversation with you right here, right now, was back in 2017. So actually, it starts before you and I met. I was having a conversation with my personal trainer at the time, and he told me that there's this like rose quartz dildo, that's what he called it, a rose quartz dildo that he saw, and I was like, wait, stop everything. I'm not gonna finish the set. What? And he's like, yeah, you can get a dildo made out of rose quartz. And I'm like, I need one, and I need one immediately. So literally I walk out of he was training me at his home. I walk out of his home, get into my car, and I start Googling rose quartz dildo. And I came up with all of these places all around the world, Australia, blah, blah, blah. I didn't care for it so much. And then I come across your website, goddesswands.com. And I'm like, this is it. And I went through your website. I saw the different, well, first of all, I want to say one of the things that I loved is that you called it a pleasure wand.
Yeah.
Come on, like, like that's exactly what it is, right? It's just like the magic is in there, and everything that like just speaks to my heart and my body. I was just like, yes. And so then that's when I reached out to you and we connected, and I you know, it's always gonna like make me chuckle inside that your name is Krystle and you deal with rose quartz, but it's not just rose quartz. You've got rose, you've got jade, you've got do you have obsidian too? Am I making
It's
up
actually
things
the
now?
rose quartz and the black obsidian, and you're being a little bit clairvoyant right now. I'm actually bringing in some jade. I haven't offered it yet. It's on the way. It's
Stop
in the
it!
mail.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I knew it. I could feel it.
Yeah.
So that's really how we met, and this is the first time that we're actually speaking because, I've seen you on social media, you've seen me on social media, we've DM'd each other, we've emailed each other, but this is like our first, like, legitimate meeting of hearts and minds. So I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like I'm just getting lost in your eyes, Paul. Just like gazing at you during you get those Scorpio eyes. Those Scorpio eyes.
Thank you. That's the way I seduce people. No, I'm
I
kidding.
believe it.
Oh my goodness. Well, you bring that up. So my sun is in Leo, but my moon and my rising are Scorpio. And this is where we connect because
Yes.
your sun is Scorpio, yes?
Correct, yes. And then my moon is in Aquarius and my rising is Leo.
Oh, okay. See? We've taken our rising and our sun and we've just flipped them, which is the soulmate connection. I love that. I love it.
Such harmony, such polarities, right? Just
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful dance, right?
absolutely.
I love it. So, Krystle, my love, tell me, how is your heart?
Oh, right now my heart feels so expansive and warm and filled with golden light. I feel so welcomed and grateful. Oh my goodness, my heart feels lovely right now.
Yay!
Yeah. feels so good, Paul, just to be able to connect with you from this heart to heart space. I feel like with everything that's been going on over the past, 6 months, 8 months, there's been this gradual moving apart. There's been this disconnection that we see reflected in so many ways in society and the people around us, where we went from embracing each other and hugging and touching and spending time in person, really sitting with each other, to nowadays you go out, and not everyone, obviously there's spaces and people where we can feel that closeness and that connection with, but there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, if you stand too close to me in the grocery store, you can feel that person get triggered, and you can feel their fear kind of ripple off of them. So the opportunity to spend time connecting from the heart with you, even in a virtual setting like this, that's the antidote. Love is the antidote to fear, right? So, so happy to meet you here.
Yes, yes. I'm so happy that you're here, and you've said so much already. It's interesting because I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and I had said something, and she's like, "Oh, come here, give me a hug." And we were on Zoom like this, and so she went to wrap her arms. It looked like she was and I went to go lean in, and it was she said, she's like, "I feel like I could smell you." She's in Quebec. But she's like, "I feel like I could smell you." And I'm like, it's so weird that you say that, because I literally just leaned in like this, and I could feel I felt myself pressed up against her bosom, and I felt it, but it was so weird, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt that in so long, but not from her, but just in general. There's going to be a lot of healing that needs to come out of this, right?
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. And I love that you shared that experience of, even through the virtual hug, you could feel and you could feel yourself being held. Oh, that's so beautiful. We're really not limited. We're really not, Paul.
No.
Oh, I'll never forget when you reached out to me. It was a couple months ago, and I was starting to feel myself a little bit bogged down with all the fear, and I hadn't really expressed that, but I think you could just tell from my tone and my stories on Instagram that I was getting a little bit agitated. And it was so beautiful. You reached out to me via DM, and one of the things you said to me is that I'm here with you. And nobody has ever said that to me in that sort of interaction before. And I felt you, and I just felt this exhale of everything that was bogging me down, and just this warmth in my heart. And you just transmuted it with your loving presence, even through something as simple as a text message through Instagram DMs. You're so powerful.
Oh, thank you. I just love you, so I wanted to reach out. So tell me, what's making your heart sing?
So what's making my heart sing is that I think, as you know, I'm a Reiki teacher as well. And I haven't been able to teach for the last 6 months, but I resumed teaching because the way that I teach in person, and it's Reiki, so we're touching, right?
Right, yeah.
So last month, August, I had my first class again in person with students, and then I just taught again last weekend. So to be able to create that space and foster that connection and that community, and just have that opportunity to, just reside in my humanity again with a group of other like-minded people, was so beautiful and so healing. So feeling very, very grateful for that, and I missed it so much. There's always a Scorpios, hey? There's the light and the dark, and we sit in both equally.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of death in my life lately. And it's been really interesting to navigate that from the headspace and the perspective that I'm at now, as opposed to the last time maybe death played a role in my life. Whether that's been through, I'll share with you, Ben's grandfather, that's my partner, is in the process of passing away today. Yeah, he's transitioning. It shouldn't be too much longer now. And that's, although it's always sad whenever we lose somebody, it's also beautiful, because his grandfather has been struggling with his health. He's been dealing with dementia for quite a few years now. So I remember Ben told me a story about how years ago his grandfather gave him a ring, and he said, "Ben, I want to give you this ring while I can still remember. While I can feel you receiving it, and I can experience just this process of giving you this gift. I want to give it to you now," because he knew it was coming.
Right.
you know? So although it is sad to see him move on in transition, it's also beautiful
Hmm.
because he's been ready for a while.
Right.
Oh, so
Wow.
that's coming up. And then with
Yeah.
clients too. I've had several clients whose animals were transitioning, whose pets, their beloved pets were transitioning, that I've held space with Reiki to facilitate their passing, to
Mm.
help them move on and let go. Death is hardest on the living, isn't it?
Hmm.
Right? For the one who's
Right.
transitioning, it's this beautiful evolution, it's this journeying into the next phase. But for those of us who are still in this plane, it's difficult to let go. So, my mom actually lost her sister, my Auntie Sheila, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So it's been interesting to just be kind of experiencing and sitting with death these last few weeks,
Hmm.
but in a beautiful way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, and thank you for sharing that because it's making me reflect on some things.
Mm,
There has been a period, and I think it's mostly since I've been really like diving into my spiritual study as I've gotten deeper and deeper into it. I've noticed myself being a little more okay with death in the sense that okay, I'm blessed that I still have both my parents, um, but you know, in uh, almost 2 years now, 2 years ago, someone from high school, my age, passed. A couple years before that, my aunt, my mother's sister, they were very close. She passed, and it seemed like with every back in the beginning, I didn't understand death, right? Like you go through the grieving and the sadness and the heartbreak and all of that. Now that still exists, but I also get to see that like this isn't the end. Like for
yes.
example, my aunt is she's always with me. Whenever I hear ABBA, I'm like, oh, there she is. Like, and it'll be random too, right? Like, I'd be in the grocery store and they're playing everything that's not even in that genre, and then all of a sudden, Dancing Queen comes on, and I'm like,
Mm,
oh, Aunt Patty is here. So, it just, in A Course in Miracles, we say, death isn't an ending; it's a continuation, and birth isn't a beginning; it's a continuation. So it's just like you said, they're transitioning, but it's just a continuation of their spirit in a different form.
absolutely. That is so beautiful. Oh, thank you for sharing that story with me about your auntie. Now, whenever I hear ABBA, I'm going to think about your auntie Patty too.
Thank you. And
Yes.
and it's stuff like that. That's how they live on, right?
Hmm.
They live on through the memories. They live on through the way that we honor and we pay our respects. It's interesting, and maybe I'm sharing a little too much, but my mother, well, this is her sister.
Mm,
They were very close. Um, Sometimes my mother doesn't like to speak about her because it brings up so much pain within my mother, right? Some sadness and
mhm.
hurt. And we haven't been taught how to honor and accept those feelings of sadness and allow them space because it's all valid, right? Everything is welcome here.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. Whereas any opportunity that I get, like to share that here, that's for me, it's like, well, this is how I get to continue celebrating her, continue feeling her in my life. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to, oh, I don't want to talk about it because it makes me sad. I want to
Oh,
talk about it because it helps her continue to live.
absolutely. I wholeheartedly hear what you're saying, and I feel you so deeply. We haven't been taught how to sit with grief.
No.
Grief is its own unique experience, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it's beautiful to be able to reach a point where you can hold grief and also hold that celebration and that joy and that unconditional, never ending, big, big love at the same time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, since we're on the topic and we're we're Scorpios, um, tell me a little bit like how do you sit with your grief?
Oh, I'm the type of person that often wants to process everything internally. before I share it with other people. And I think that might be somewhat of a Scorpio trait. We're just so
Hmm.
much more comfortable going inside, making sense of how we're feeling, and then coming out afterwards and sharing what we've learned. But grief has taught me that I can't always do that. Sometimes grief brings me down to my knees, and I need to reach out. And I need someone to just witness me and hold me while I cry. Because sometimes I need that other person in order to even facilitate that deep emotional sobbing release that I need sometimes.
Hmm.
And I think that's very interesting because I have some people in my life who can cry so easily and so freely. Sometimes I can, but not always. So for me, sitting with grief is really giving myself permission to reach out and be held. Also, giving myself grace and understanding that it's going to come in waves. There's going to be moments where it hits you so hard and so deep, and you feel like you're on the bottom of the ocean. And then there's going to be, it could be even the next minute, like immediately following that, there might be something that makes you laugh, something that brings you back up into that joyful space. And that's okay. It's allowed to come and go, it's allowed to move the way that it's going to move.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? I'm just thinking about so many things right now. Pluto is in
Mm.
retrograde right now. Pluto is, death and destruction.
Mhm.
Scorpio being our sign, and the connection between Scorpio and Pluto. But for just that, what you said about like that, it's like you're at the bottom of the ocean. That has always been like when I'm going through my emotional things and my
Mhm.
Scorpio side is like I'm really steeping in it. That's the image that I always have going into like the depths of the ocean where it's so dark. Oh gosh, it makes me think of. Are you familiar with Estero, the singer?
Yes.
Okay, Black Mermaid. Do you know this song?
It's one of her songs that I'm not as familiar with, but I know that I've listened to it and loved it.
Girl, I almost want to pause this so we can listen to it now and cry. No, it's just, it's such a beautiful song because she says, I'm a black mermaid from the bottom of the sea. I'll teach you how to love me. And she
Mm,
goes on
mm,
saying, I can't, the lyrics aren't coming to me right now, but the feeling is like welling up. It's like she goes on about how she's just really in this depth and this darkness, but she can still teach you how to love. She can still
mhm.
be that one that expresses that love with you, and that's that. Listen to that.
Oh,
That song makes me cry. But yeah, it makes me think of all of this stuff I'm thinking about, or is popping into my mind as we're having this conversation.
I can't wait to listen to it again. And I love that lyric, how it just struck such a chord with you. Because, Paul, don't you think that's how we learn to love? Like, really, truly love unconditionally and have that just endless compassion is by being able to go sit in the depths.
Oh,
Really, really sit in the depths and witness it all of those shadowy, dark, hurting parts, the tenderest parts of our being. Once you come back up out of that deep, deep, deep water, you come back with so many gifts, so many treasures. And now
oh,
you can meet that when you encounter it in another human being. When you encounter
yes.
that deep, deep grief or that deep sadness or tenderness, whatever it is, you can sit with it. You're not afraid of it.
And that for me, having been down in that space and then coming back up, and if I can then see the next person is sort of going down in there, not that I'm going to stop them from going there, but I'm going to do what I can to make that, I don't want to say easier, but just to make that whole situation be a little bit more supportive and supported
Absolutely.
without like, you know, there's times where I can see where it's like, I get this from my mother. I just want everybody to be happy, so I'm going to do whatever I need to do so they're happy, and
Yep.
I don't want you to feel pain. But then at the same time, we all have to, right? We all have to experience that. So, for me, it's having had that experience makes me a little bit more compassionate when I see people in that space to either offer, stand with, witness, whatever you need. Just know that I'm here to be of support to you, whatever that looks
Absolutely.
like. It just brings a little bit
Wholeheartedly
more
agree.
peace to the world, I think.
It's true. You know, in the earliest part of my life, the first half of my life, and I haven't talked a lot about this, so I was actually wondering if this was going to come organically in our conversation. Was a little bit hoping it would. I suffered and struggled with severe mental illness for the first half of my life. I experienced such intense depression and anxiety. I had a list of diagnoses as long as your arm, I like to say, when I speak back about that time. It was really hard. So to remember what it was like to go through that sitting on the bottom of the ocean phase before versus how I understand it now, what you said just really resonated with me because now I navigate those experiences so differently and I don't experience them in the same way. And to be able to help other people when they're navigating those depths, like you said, to go through it just with more support, more love, just hold them in love is the precious gift that I believe was alchemized out of that experience for me. Because I experienced a tremendous healing. It was 15 years that I struggled with severe, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder.
Wow.
And those things, we're taught that there's no relief from them. We're taught that if you have that experience, that will be your experience for the rest of your life. And I really had absorbed that. And for a lot of people, that can be their truth. And I honor that and I respect that and hold space for that too. But for me, I was so medicated, Paul. I was on 8 different prescriptions for 15 years, heavy, heavy dosages. I felt like I couldn't feel. I couldn't cry. Things would happen in my life that were so heartbreaking and I couldn't even feel it. Oh, it was a tough time. I lost my creativity. I used to draw and write so much when I was a child, and while I was so heavily medicated, I couldn't draw, I couldn't write, nothing would come out. I was just numb. It felt like I was wrapped in layers and layers of cotton batting.
Wow.
And in hindsight, I'm grateful that I had that at the time because I needed it. Because I didn't know what I do now. And I didn't have the tools that I have now. I didn't have meditation. I didn't have Reiki. I didn't have yoga. I didn't have community. I didn't have anyone to teach me how to feel my feelings, really sit with them, go down and then come back up. So I needed it then. But thankfully, it was 2012, so 8 years ago now, I started to learn those tools. And I fought it. I was so skeptical. People had tried to suggest to me my whole life, like, well, maybe you could try this. I was so closed off to it. And we've all encountered people like that, right? Who you try to
Yes.
make a suggestion, like, maybe you could try meditation. And they're like, as if it could be that simple,
Right.
right? They're so resistant. I was that way. But there was some really powerful experiences I had that really brought me to my knees and opened me to this idea that there was more out there and that something could help me. I had a near death experience.
Wow.
Yeah,
Are you open to like diving into that a little deeper?
absolutely. Yeah. Um, so this was during that part in my life that I was just sharing with you. My mental health was probably at the worst it had ever been. I was struggling so deeply. And I had been engaged and my engagement had ended. I was at the lowest that I've ever been. And I was really struggling with addiction at the time too, because that was one of the ways that I self-medicated and cocooned myself against the intensity of everything I was feeling. I was struggling with addiction. My drug of choice had always been cannabis, which is a beautiful medicine for many people, and I have such respect for it, but that's not how I treated it. I didn't treat it like medicine. So I was driving to work, and I was so dependent on it at this point in my life. I'm not proud of this. And I don't know, maybe we should edit this part out. But I was driving to work and I worked a morning shift. I was leaving my boyfriend's house at the time and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. I started at 6, so it's probably about 5:30 in the morning. I was going to be late, so I was speeding. I was going about 100 kilometers an hour, and I'm not proud of it, but I was high. I was under the influence. And my headlights on my vehicle were really dirty, but I was in a rush, so I didn't stop to clean them off. And this was at that time of morning. It was late in the year. It was probably around October, maybe late September, early October, so it's still quite dark at 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning. The road was wet. I remember that. And there's a portion of road that I was driving on in between Edmonton and Sherwood Park where there are no streetlights. So I was totally fine as long as there were streetlights, but my headlights were so dirty once I was on that patch of road where there was no other light sources. I couldn't really see the boundaries of the road. And I just remember cresting. I was going about 100 kilometers an hour, remember, and the road is wet. I remember cresting the top of a hill. And as I got to the top of the hill, I saw a pair of headlights coming directly for me. So by that point, by the time I see them, they're on top of you. Right? Like you are about to have a head-on collision at 100 kilometers an hour. There was no time to steer. There was no time to react. There was no time to do anything. And it probably would likely have been my moment to die, my moment to transition. But something else happened. It was like there was this tremendous, blinding white light. And it felt like for just a moment, source, spirit, creator, whatever you refer to it as, pressed pause. And then the next thing you know, Paul, my vehicle was parked perfectly on the side of the road. Their vehicle was proceeding on. There was no crash. There was no steering. There was no screeching tires, nothing, just light pause car. And I was shaking and sobbing. And I just kept saying thank you over and over again.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Powerful, powerful experience. So I think it had to be that dramatic because I was that resistant.
Yeah.
So it had to be that intense for me to wake up. But I remember getting to work, and one of my coworkers, he was the delivery coordinator. He was an older gentleman in his 50s, Cliff. And he said to me, "You look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, "I feel like I did." And he's like, "Yeah," because he knew that I had struggled with addiction at that time. Him and I had talked quite openly. And he used to be in the Navy, and he had had his own struggles. For him, it was with alcohol. But he said to me, "You know, Krystle, I had a few nights of those myself." He's like, "It really makes you think about smartening up, doesn't it?" Oh.
Wow.
And it was after that experience that things started activating in a big way. I remember being shaken to my core. Obviously, at this point, because of that experience, now I'm questioning, maybe there is something else out there. Maybe there is a God. Maybe there is something beyond just this flesh and bones. And maybe that something can help me. I don't know. But then my hands started to activate on their own. I was with a good friend of mine, and she used to have tremendous anxiety, terrible anxiety. And when she would have an anxiety attack, she would get heart palpitations. Like she'd need to go to the hospital. It was so severe.
Wow.
And we were together with her mother, her aunt, and her grandmother, because they had just found out that her aunt, who they were all very close to, had breast cancer. So they were processing that news and kind of deciding what to do next. And she had asked me to come with just to kind of be emotional support. So we were all in the vehicle, and she started having a panic attack. And understanding what I do now, I realized that she was starting to empathically process all of the fear and all of the anxiety and all of the feelings in that vehicle, because she's so connected to those women around her. And she had really, usually when we have such severe anxiety, that's often the case, right? So she started having a panic attack, and all around her, her mother and her grandmother and her auntie were telling her, just calm down, just breathe. But I could sense that was having the opposite effect.
As it does.
It wasn't calming her down at all. And somehow I just knew what to do. I just said a prayer and just asked. And I wasn't even religious. Remember, I was just on the cusp of awakening, still in denial of everything. But some part of me knew what to do. And I said a prayer and I asked to be given what I needed to help her. And I just reached out and I placed my hands on her ankles. And it felt like there was this energy moving through me and into her. And she locked eyes with me. And it felt like this bubble formed around us. Nobody else was in this bubble with us. And we just breathed together. I didn't say a word, but our breath synced up and we just breathed deeply. And our panic attack dissolved. And that happened
Wow.
2 more times that night. At the end of the night, her mother took me aside and said, Krystle, I didn't want to talk about this in front of my mother because they're very Catholic and they wouldn't understand.
Right, of
She
course.
said, but you have some sort of an ability, and it's a lot like Reiki. So you should check that out. And I was just, okay, I'd never even heard of it. It had never even occurred to me. But after that, I did check it out, and I went and received my first session. And I remember laying on the table, and it felt like for the first time in 15 years, I felt a moment of peace.
Wow.
Or 15 years of just feeling so locked in struggle in my mind with my emotions. I could breathe and I could just exist in the moment. So I thought to myself, I'm going to keep going back. I went back. I had a couple more sessions. And finally, the lady who I was seeing said, Krystle, if this is something that really helps you, and it obviously is, I can teach you. You can learn this for yourself, and then it's with you for the rest of your life. You'll never be without it. So I decided to learn. After level 1, I was able to reduce my dosages of my medication by 50%. After level
Whoa.
2, I was able to go off them entirely. And that was 8 years ago.
Wow.
That was 8 years ago. And learning those, like part of it was definitely like just a full body, divine, energetic healing. I feel that. I know that in my bones. I think also part of it was what we were talking about earlier in the conversation. It was learning that all of my emotions are valid. All of my emotions have messages for me and they're important. And the more I try to squash them down or suppress them, the louder and more insistent they become. But the more willing I am to sit with them, hold space for my feelings, hear them out, then I can navigate that. And it doesn't impact me the same way at all anymore.
Right.
So it was learning how to just sit with those heavy seeming feelings and alchemize them and learn from them.
Wow. It's interesting what happens when we stop stuffing things down, right? When
Oh,
we allow them space, right? A lot
oh,
because
yes.
we've been trained that you can't be sad, you can't grieve, you can't do all of these things. It's been a month since so and so died. You should be over it now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we can't do that, right? We because when we do that, we limit our experience. I always say we're
Mm-hmm.
blessed as humans to feel an entire spectrum of human emotion.
Yes.
So why would like you're only on this planet Earth in this body for like a blink of an eye in time, in eternity. Why not
Mm-hmm.
just experience it all? Maybe that's the Scorpio in me. It's just like
Oh,
just do it all. But yeah, it's interesting what happens because I know when for myself, similar to you, once I allowed myself to experience things, and once I was more aware of, oh, I see I can see what's happening in my body. This is a signal that I need more alone time, or this is a
yes.
signal that I need to go to sleep, or when a child is super ultra cranky and they start crying because
Yes.
their TV show went on commercial, and it's like, okay, time for a nap. Like that would
Yes.
be me with everything.
Same.
And yeah, and it was like the second I gave myself permission, and it was interesting because like even in my current relationship, being able to not ask, tell that this is what I need right now. Not, hey,
Mm-hmm.
can I have some alone time this weekend because I've had a stressful week? No, I'm taking some alone time this weekend. So you're gonna stay at your place, I'm gonna stay at mine, and I'll catch you next time. It doesn't mean it's forever. I'm never gonna see you again. It just means like if I spend one more minute with another human being, I will say something mean and burn my house down. You know what I mean? It's
Yes, I
like
do.
so but I think it starts with those small things like the self-care, and then that
Oh,
eventually turns into the big things like the creating boundaries in our relationship, being able to heal ourselves from traumatic experiences, just by honoring whatever that is. And
Wholeheartedly agree.
and also, just so we're clear, like there's a difference between honoring when you're, when you're sad or angry or whatever, and then it's something else to like take that and use it against people and spew your anger and sadness and stuff
Mm-hmm.
at other people. That's not what I'm saying, but recognizing and giving it space to move, not to take over.
You're so right. I resonate so deeply with everything you've just said. I love the way you express that.
Ah, thank
I'm
you.
telling you, I need to take space. Or I'm
Exactly.
going to say something mean and burn my house.
Exactly. And that's the
Yes.
same for when I've spent too much time with people and when I'm hungry.
Yes.
So step one, have something to eat. Step two, if it's still there, alone time. That's usually
Mhm.
what my thing
Oh, I
is.
love that you said that because that was one of the things that Cliff had said to me that day in that conversation. He said, they taught us this acronym, HALT. And I was like, what does that mean? He said, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. He's like, if you get one or two of those things, you're not doing so great, but you'll probably be okay. He's like, but if you get all four, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, stop everything. Stop everything and do what you need to do in order to resolve those feelings because otherwise you're going to burn your house down.
And everybody that's in it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
never forget that piece of wisdom. Oh,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. Halt. That's
And it's
beautiful.
like it's all there, right? Because it's like feed yourself, nourish and care for yourself. If you're angry, why are you angry? What's really going on there? Right? What do you need to sit with? Have your boundaries been crossed in some way? Are you feeling disrespected? Do you need to stand up for yourself? Do you need to express something calmly and clearly with love? If you're lonely, is it connection that you truly need? Is there someone you need to reach out to ask to hold space for you? And if you're tired, man, take a nap.
Yeah.
You'll feel better.
100%. I am pro nap.
Same.
Okay, so you went from where you were to then
Mhm.
getting accustomed to the energy that you're feeling pulsing through your hands and in your body to getting attuned with Reiki. Where do the goddess wands come into play? Let's talk about this for a second.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was actually a beautiful evolution of that healing process, to be honest with you. I remember when I took the second degree training, my Reiki teacher at the time, Diana, she just like casually printed off this article called The Importance of Forgiveness and Healing and like tucked it in with my
Right.
manual because she knew I needed to read it, but also she didn't want to push it on me, right? These things have to come up organically from ourselves when we're ready.
Right.
But as soon as I read that article, I knew exactly what I needed to forgive. There's layers to that, obviously, but the biggest one, I knew it was definitely related to sexual trauma that I had experienced when I was younger. And then also, I was raped when I was 16. So there was obviously those sort of experiences, they leave imprints on us. Energetically, they can create rips and tears and holes in our aura. Or if we're not in a position where we have the knowledge and we have the tools to process the feelings that those experiences leave with us, oftentimes we end up just packing them down, stuffing them down, like you said, storing them in our aura and in our bodies and carrying them around. And those experiences, that trauma, it continues to affect us for the rest of our life until we do learn how to unpack it, until we do learn how to consciously extricate and release it, transmute it with love.
Right.
So I knew what I needed to forgive, but I didn't know how. At the time, I really struggled because I believed that some things were truly unforgivable. It took some time for me to understand that forgiveness, it's not about the other person. It's really not. There's, in pranic healing, Master Choa Sui talks about inner forgiveness versus outer forgiveness. He talks about how outer forgiveness, like that's the concept that we're all the most familiar with, where it's like, I forgive you, you can come back into my life and you can play a role in my experience. You're allowed back into my field now. Versus inner forgiveness. Inner forgiveness is on a soul level. Inner forgiveness says, I understand that we are all here to learn and grow. And I understand that making mistakes is part of how we learn. And I know I've made mistakes and you have too. So I forgive you so that we can both be set free on a spiritual level. Not everybody deserves outer forgiveness, but we can give everyone inner forgiveness when we're ready, because it really does set us free. So once I began to understand that, I began to do my healing and forgiveness work. That, Paul, was when my mental health completely transformed. And there was a physical impact on my body too. My flow, my menstruation as a woman had stopped when I was 16 years old. I had taken the birth control shot, Depo-Provera. My GP had recommended it to me. And you're supposed to only get your period like a few times a year, probably, if you take that. But for me, the day I got that shot, I was bleeding when I got it. My period ceased, and it ceased entirely for the entire 3 years I was on that needle. And normally after you go off of Depo-Provera, after about a year, your period returns. I went off at 19. I didn't receive another natural period without some form of hormonal birth control stimulating it artificially until I was 27 years old. At the same time I did this forgiveness work, at the same time my mental health resolved. So there was such a clear connection between this old trauma and pain that I had been holding and carrying and my mental emotional health and my physical health. It was all connected. So I began to really understand how important this work was because I saw it reflected in my own life, in my own body. And being Scorpio, you know, we sit so naturally with sex and death. We sit
Yes.
so naturally with all of it, right? I've always been a very sensual, very sexual person, like you. But but it was interesting because as a result of those experiences I had had when I was younger, I had a very difficult relationship with my sexuality. It felt simultaneously like something that was so powerful and so beautiful and so innately a part of me. And at the same time, it felt like something that was destructive, something that could create so much pain, or something that could overwhelm me, or overpower other people and attract experiences that I didn't want to have. So I found that my sensual energy would ebb and flow. It would almost become cyclical. Like there'd be years where I was super sexual, hypersexual, and then there would be years where I really wasn't that interested. And as I began really looking at this and observing it in myself and really paying attention to my thoughts and feelings around it, I realized it was because although I knew it was an inherent part of me and my nature and my magic and my power, I was also terrified of it. You know, I wrote a blog post once, and one of the lines that really stuck with me was, it's hard to feel safe being sexual when your sexuality has been weaponized against you. So I realized, like, if this is something that I'm feeling and I'm experiencing, where I feel disconnected from and distrustful of my own sexuality, even while knowing that it's something so beautiful and that it belongs to me, it's like, how many other people have experienced sexual trauma who are feeling this way too? And what would be the best way to help empower people to do this excavating and this healing and transmuting work on their own? Because there's a lot of things that we can go to somebody else to have them help us through. But when it comes to our sexuality and our pleasure, that is the most powerful, I feel, when it comes from us, right? Yeah,
Yes.
from our own hands, from our own touch, from our own breath and our own intentions.
Yes.
So I became aware right around this time of crystal pleasure wands, and I thought, oh wow, what a brilliant idea. Because if you have something that's made specifically for pleasure, that's made from rose quartz, the stone of unconditional love and healing, and quartz is so programmable, you can so easily fill it with your intentions. Every time you orgasm, it's an act of self-care, it's an act of self-nurturing. It's also harnessing that orgasmic energy and consciously directing it towards disintegrating, releasing, transmuting, reclaiming. So I thought, this is something I need to do, and I just knew it in my heart. I was so sure of it that I didn't want to tell anybody about it until it was done. Because sometimes when there's things we want to do, if we talk to other people about them, and I know everybody's different with this, some people are like, if I tell you about it, I'm going to hold myself accountable, so I'm going to make sure it happens.
Right.
Nuh-uh. I'm like, I'm going to hold it like a little secret in my heart until I birth it, and
Yes.
then I'm going to show you what I made.
I love that.
So I went and I did the research, and I found a carver who could create them for me. And I didn't even tell my partner Ben about this. I didn't tell anybody about this until
Wow.
they came in the mail and I was holding them in my hands. And when I said, this is something I'm doing now, I had $200. That's how I started this business.
Wow.
And I did everything. I still do everything. Shipping, customer service, you name it, I do it. So it's very much like born of love. This is my baby. This was very healing for me, actually, to understand that perhaps part of the reason on a soul level I've had the experiences that I've had with sexual trauma was so that, just like we talked about earlier, when you sit down on the bottom of the ocean, you're not afraid of it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you can hold space for other people to go through it with more love and more support. So it's like, this is part of my medicine now. How can I help other people heal themselves? So that's how Goddess Wands was born.
I love that, and I want to thank you. I'm currently holding mine. It's this is something that's very special to me, so I'm not going to put it on the screen right now. With me, like, I reached out to you, and the reason why I wanted it was because I know all of the crystal healing properties, but B, because I'm a very sexual individual and I love different like toys and little knickknacks and stuff to use when I'm with myself. And
Absolutely.
what I was surprised but not surprised at the same time. I had an experience with my wand. I had done like a beautiful ritual. I warmed it up with warm water. It was around either a new or a full moon. I can't remember exactly, but this was back in 2017 when I first had it. And I think what triggered this was I had just sort of ended a relationship that we just weren't on the same page. So I had to I had this intimate experience with my pleasure wand, and this feeling of love came over me from like the inside out. I can't even describe it, but it was like, the only way that I can describe it is like I was making love to someone that had such absolute love and adoration and healing and just capital L love for me. And that is what was like pulsing through my body through that experience. And I can say to this day, I don't remember experiencing that with any other human being or myself. And it was just so healing. I remember after that feeling like something had been like removed, like blasted, and I was also like physically exhausted. I probably slept for like 12 hours that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, from that moment, my experiences, my sexual experiences, but also my relationship with my sexuality has changed so much. Getting a little too TMI, but also sharing as a young gay boy growing up Catholic. So there was all of that. And then, breaking free from that in my teens, coming out as, gay and going out to do all of the things. I haven't really talked about this, and I wouldn't use the word rape because when I think of that word, I think of Jodie Foster in The Accused. I don't know if you remember that movie. But I had been violated quite a few times within my early years of being out and exploring my sexuality, and especially a lot by older men. I just didn't know how to navigate my sexual energy. I didn't know how to work with it. I didn't know how to integrate it into my life. And so a bunch of that stuff happened, which then led to me making some other like really not so, healthy decisions for myself. But that came from, loneliness and fear and all of that stuff. But it was like from that moment with this, things have shifted within me where I was able to like sniff things out sooner so I could say no. or I wouldn't put
Mhm.
myself in certain situations. And then that led to me, like I had already been flirting with the idea of having deeper sexual connections. This was part of my spiritual practice, but this just like intensified it, that then I got to a point where all sexual encounters for me with a partner, or when I wasn't, dating anyone, had a depth to it. And if it didn't, I just wouldn't be able to go on with it. Whereas before I would have just been like, all right, let's just get this over done with. Then I was able to start speaking up in my boundaries and saying no to things a lot easier. I don't know. I don't really have the language or the way to describe it right now, but that's one of the things that I noticed with this tool in conjunction with some of the other tools. Like I've studied tantra, sexual kung fu, all of these sort of things, and just all of it combined has really connected me to my creative sexual energy, sensual energy, but not just related to sex, but related to how I create in the world. Because there was, for a period of time, where I just thought, oh man, I'm just so horny. I'm just so horny, and I go do whatever. But then as I started to get more, I don't know what the word is. Became more in tune with my sexual energy, I started to realize it wasn't that I was horny and I wanted to get off. I just had this urge to create something beautiful.
Yes.
And then I started to transmute that into, all right, I'm gonna create this new meditation, or I'm going to create this new platform for me to share meditation with people. It started to like turn into different ways that I then created something. Just as the act of sex creates a human, the
Yes.
act of me being in tune with, and not necessarily, like now I practice a lot of semen retention for periods of time so
Mhm.
that I can use that energy again to create something else.
Yes.
So it's very, I don't know, it's just very, it's amazing and cool. And you've been like instrumental in my process. So just with so many of the things, with bringing the pleasure wand into my life first and foremost, but also just with the education that you share on social. I don't know if you maybe you remember this, maybe you don't. You did a cleanse, a smudging, but with
With the
frankincense.
frankincense. I
Yes, and I reached
remember.
out to you, and I'm like, "Can a man do this?" And you're like,
Yes.
"Absolutely." And I've done that. I've done that a few times, and it's like I like to do that, especially after I've ended a relationship with somebody and there was intimacy like that.
Mhm.
To just clean slate.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so thank you so much for that, and for bringing this
Oh,
into my world and sharing it with the world, because I just think it's so, that's an interesting thing. And we sort of talked about this earlier before we hit record. I I'm comfortable with sharing this because of my experience, but I don't know if a lot of other people are ready to hear this, because, and one of the
mm,
reasons why I don't like the word dildo is not that there's anything wrong with it, but I think a lot of times when you use dildo, people think of like, you know, porn and sex shops and all of that stuff, which are beautiful and
mhm.
lovely. And Scorpio, hello, I'm all up in there.
Yes.
And also this comes from a deeper level, and it
Exactly.
comes from the healing properties of pleasure itself, not just in a sexual sense, but even
Exactly.
the way we just sit down and enjoy our food, you know?
Mhm.
Or we sit down and we luxuriate in a bath. Or we just love the way we smell like essential oils or flowers or cooking or whatever. Just the sensual experience of all the senses coming from the heart.
Mhm.
That's what the pleasure wands are for me. So, yeah, I just, for anybody that's listening out there that is just like, what are these pleasure wands? I want to learn more. Like, again, it's not just about sex. It's all of it. And enjoying sex if you want to. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Absolutely.
because that's what it's there for.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes. Oh, Paul, thank you so
yeah.
much.
You're
Thank you so much
welcome.
for sharing that with me. It's so beautiful to hear you and just witness you as you spoke about pleasure. You spoke about your body and all of the shifts and transformations that took place. My goodness, you are just such a radiant being.
Thank
You
you.
are.
I'm just doing my work and sharing it with the world. That's really all
Absolutely.
that I can do.
I really love how you said sometimes I'm not sure. We talked about how our clients or the people who are most close to us, who are most intimate to us, obviously our friends, our lovers, our family, they know that we're very sensual beings, but our clients don't necessarily see us that way because we show
Right.
up with them in different ways. And that resonates with me so deeply because it actually made me feel fragmented for a long time. So prior to practicing Reiki and then eventually creating Goddess Wands, I was a makeup artist and I still am. So I have people in my life who only know me through that experience as a makeup artist. And I had people in my life who only know me through Reiki and that sort of hands-on healing work. And then I have people in my life who only know me through Goddess Wands. And it took a long time for me to feel safe enough to be wholly and completely myself in front of all of them, because I would catch myself shape shifting a little bit. Like if I'm
Yes.
around the makeup artist people, well, I'm not going to be too deep. We're going to keep it light, right? We're going to keep it comfortable. If I'm around the Reiki people, then we're only going to talk about spirituality, but never are we going to talk about sexuality.
Oh God, no.
And do you know what I'm saying? And if we're
Yeah.
around the Goddess Wands people, then we're not going to talk about makeup because we don't want them to think that we're shallow. So it's this fragmentation, and it has been so healing for me to, through the process of my own inner work, reach a place where I feel comfortable showing up exactly the way that I am, and I trust that people will love me in my wholeness and in my completeness and take
Hmm.
it the way that it's intended. Like you said, with sexuality, there's so many negative connotations. Negative isn't necessarily the word, but it can be very earthy and it can be very purely sexual, and that's wonderful too. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
And also, like you said, it's one of the great pleasures of being alive. It's one of the beautiful things that we get to experience when we take human form and we get to experience the full spectrum of human emotion, like you talked about earlier. And also the beautiful sensual pleasures, delicious food, beautiful scents, the sensation of silk gliding against our skin, all of those things.
Yes.
It's part of why we're here. It's part of why we're here.
Yeah. We were created from an orgasm, so why can't life be orgasmic? Am
Yes, yes,
I
you are. Yes, you are.
right? Oh my goodness. You just said something that makes me think of another aspect of myself because I consider myself a naturist. If
Hmm.
I don't have to wear clothes, I won't.
Yes.
When I'm in Italy, you'll only find me at the nude beaches. I enjoy my body, but I also love the freedom. A lot of people mistaken nudity with sex.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just interesting about people's perceptions of sex, nudity. There's some people that like nudity can't even be portrayed in art and artistic forms
Oh,
because then it's
yes.
considered pornography.
Isn't that
And
heartbreaking?
I don't get it.
Oh, that breaks my heart when people are so repressed and they just have so much internalized shame, like you said, about their bodies that they need to project that shame outwardly on every other body.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as you're telling me this, I'm just thinking of that photo of you, and I think you're in Italy, and you're walking, and it looks like you're in like a vineyard or something, and you're just full buck in, in your skin,
Yep.
and you look so happy and so at peace and just so perfectly a part of your environment. So it makes so much sense. It's interesting that we also have this in common as well. Because
Yeah.
I love to be naked. When I'm at home, probably I would say 95% of the time I'm naked. And
Hmm.
it's cute because my boyfriend, he's never naked. So
Okay.
Ben's not a never nude, but close. Anyway. So um at the women's retreat that I attended this last year, this summer, it's in BC, it's in British Columbia. The place that it's held is called Quantum Leaps. And that's right on the banks of this river. And it forms these beautiful puddles of the thickest, gushiest glacial mud. And you're totally encouraged to nude mud bathe and to just be naked in the river while you're there. The whole place is clothing optional, but people usually limit it to the riverbanks. And that is, whenever I think about the moment in my life where I feel the most myself. I remember a couple years ago laying on my back, just fully encased in the mud. The sun is beaming down upon me. The river is trickling and flowing around me. A little butterfly is just kind of lazily floating by. And just that feeling of the sunlight warming my skin and the cold water flowing past and the earth grounding me and holding me. Like I felt so perfectly myself, so perfectly my truest expression of myself. And I've held that feeling in that place and that time in my heart ever since. And this last year, this summer, the organizer, my friend Christina, she gifted the facilitator. So if you facilitated a workshop, she gifted you a photo session. And the photographer that came, she was like, what do you want for your pictures? And at first I thought, well, like, I was thinking practically, right? I was like, well, we should probably do some like branding photos. But it took me all of about 1 minute before I was like, you know what? I just want to be naked in the river. Will you photograph me
Mm.
naked in the river and sliding around in the mud after? And I haven't,
Yes.
right? And I haven't seen all of the photos yet. I saw just like a screen capture of one of them while the photographer was editing them. And it's interesting because I love being naked in my skin so much, but I also have so much of my own stuff
Mm-hmm.
that needs healing around seeing myself from a third person perspective, seeing
Right.
my body through somebody else's eyes. So it's going to be very powerfully healing and also challenging for me in the best way when I get those photos back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, isn't it? Body stuff, body image, how we perceive ourselves, how the world perceives us.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much there to dive into.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We talk about this in A Course in Miracles. It's a suit of clothes.
Yeah.
It's not who we are. It's not like it doesn't define us, yet we get so hung up on it
Oh,
that the hang up on our body often stands in the way of our ability to accomplish things beyond our body. Do you know what I
that's so
mean?
true. Yes.
And so
Oh,
it's that's why if we when we can get to a place, even if it's like I just love my eyebrows, just start with one thing. If we can
yeah.
get to a place where it's just like I love this, then hopefully it could lead to, well, and I also love this and I also love this, until one day we just love our entire being exactly as it shows up, right? Because the other thing too, we need to love that our body is never the same. The body I have today is not the body I had yesterday. It's not the body I'm going to have tomorrow,
Yes.
right? Especially as those tomorrows keep coming,
Mm-hmm.
and our wear and tear on our body starts to shift the shape or the suppleness or what have you, still be able to love that aspect of ourselves. That's why a lot of
Absolutely.
times when, whenever I, as a naturist, I don't always go. Lately, I've been talking a little bit more about it, but I don't always talk about it. But here's an example. There was a couple years ago, I led a meditation mob in front of our city hall in Toronto. And it happened to be the same. I did not organize this. I was just part of the group. But on the very same day, it was the naked bike ride day.
Oh,
And so we're all sitting there, we're doing our meditation. We finished our meditation, and at the same time, just as soon as we were done the meditation, a group of like hundreds of nude cyclists come into City Hall, and we have a fountain there, and they were bouncing around and playing and everything. And people are like, oh my God, there's just some things you don't want to see naked. And I'm like,
why not?
why would you say that? You know what I mean? Like, all bodies are welcome, all ages are welcome, like every expression of a physical body is welcome here, period. I don't care abilities, I don't care look, I don't care size, shape, color, texture, I don't care any of that. All limbs, no limbs, I don't care. Just your body. That's your vessel for
Yeah.
your soul. Celebrate that shit, you know?
Yes, I do.
And then one
Mm-hmm.
day we can all just be happily frolicking across the lands with
So
unicorns and rainbows.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why don't we do a few quick rapid fire questions?
okay, okay.
What makes your heart heavy?
Oh, self-judgment, self-criticism. I can be very, very hard on myself. That is the thing that drags me down the most. It's not even from anybody else. Whenever somebody else says something and it makes me feel a certain type of way, it's only because what they're saying is touching on some wound, some hurt that I have that I already believe about myself on some level.
Wow.
That's the reason it hurts, right? Yeah.
Ooh, thank you for that. That brings me so much to reflect on. Thank you. What makes your heart have an orgasm?
Oh. I love what makes my heart have an orgasm. Being pampered, being spoiled, being treated like a queen makes my heart have an orgasm. I absolutely adore that. I've had past life readings, and every time they're like, "You were a queen."
Like, I am a queen.
Right? Thank you. And also, it's what makes my heart have an orgasm is feeling really like honored and just really treasured, and like that divine feminine that's inside of me, when that's recognized, oh, it's like I just open up and I'm so much more willing to just share all of that goodness and all that magic that's inside of me. And then from that place of mutual like opening and trust and just wanting to give and share with each other, orgasmic heart explosion.
Ah, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's juicy. Oh my God, I love you so much. Thank you so much for just like being here and just sharing your just delicious, gorgeous, juicy goddess self with me and everyone that's listening.
Oh, it's so, so, so mutual, Paul. I adore you. I adore you. You are such a special human, and the opportunity to connect with you this way and converse and just have this amazing conversation, it's everything today. I loved it so much.
Oh, I love you. My face is going to hurt from smiling so much, so thank you.
My cheeks are already a little sore.
I love you, my dear. We'll chat again soon, yes?
Oh, yes, I would love that. I love you too, Paul.
Thank you so much once again to Krystle for being a guest in today's show. And thank you all for listening. Please remember to like, share, follow, subscribe, etc. to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, the Living Spiritfully Collective Facebook group is there for you to join in and continue the conversation with us. Everything you need to know to connect with Krystle and myself are in the show's notes, so please check them out. Thank you so much. I love you, and I'll see you again soon.